Good evening. Good evening. I'm John Miko, the president of Founding Forward. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to tonight's Jack Templeton Liberty Series program. Founding Forward, as I think most of you know, is a nonprofit charity affiliated with the Union League of Philadelphia, and we're focused on civics education. Civics education for teachers and students and for the community that is focused on the values, the principles of liberty, and the American political tradition and American history. And we are, although it's summer, we are right in the middle of perhaps our busiest programming of the season. We have 100 teachers right now from just about every state in the Union at Liberty Hill in Lafayette Hill, PA, learning about the Revolutionary War and about the history of immigration. We have another 100 coming in this weekend on Friday and Sunday. We have 50 students coming to our Valley Forge campus on Thursday for our Spirit of America program. And we are growing our programs here in the Philadelphia region with partners, schools, and reaching more and more students and teachers. And this is what we were built to do, is to bring the message and the education on civics and liberty to as many Americans as we possibly can. And I thank you for all of you who support our work. Much of our work gets done through partners. We have partners and chapters across the country and here in the Philadelphia region who help us bring students, who raise money to bring teachers, to Philadelphia and Valley Forge. And we have a lot of great partners, and one of them is the Atlas Network, and we're thrilled that they're here with us today. I'll talk a little bit more about them in just a moment, but before I do that, some housekeeping. Please take a moment and silence your cell phone. Would appreciate that. We will do Q&A. I'll moderate the Q&A. Please use the microphone as we are streaming live. We're a small room tonight, but we need to hear you on the streaming as well. Well, our next program will be on July 30th, and it's at our Valley Forge campus. It's at the Founding Forward Valley Forge campus, and it's with Medal of Honor recipient Ryan Pitts. And you're going to love this theme, Love of Country Leads. That's the name of his talk. So please, July 30th, it should be a great talk. Everything we do through the generosity of League members and others who believe in what we do and want us to succeed, want us as a nation to succeed, and through partners. And Atlas Network is one of those partners. They are a leader in the freedom movement, an international leader. And I'll let the CEO of Atlas Network tell you a little bit more about that, and he'll introduce the program as well. Please say hello to Mr. Brad Pitts. Brad.
Okay, so thank you so much, John, and thank you to Founding Forward for bringing us all together at a beautiful location, if not amid beautiful weather. But I know that we're going to have a great program tonight, and I say that with confidence because I've known our guest speaker for more than a dozen years, I think, through my work leading an organization called Atlas Network, which has this interesting role. Atlas is a nonprofit here in the U.S., and we work as the hub of a community of think tanks that operate locally, independently, within their own countries. And each of them is devoted to, I think, the kind of principles that Founding Forward represents, where you're always trying to look for ways to increase the freedom that individuals enjoy and bring some skepticism to top-down approaches to government that can crowd out private initiative and the work of voluntary society. So all of our partners around the world, we've now got more than 500 in 100 different countries, as well as a lot of great partners like Founding Forward here in the US, and they all are working in this direction to move what we call the Overton window in a direction toward freedom. And Overton window has become a term that really just means the conventional wisdom about public policy reform. How do you move that towards an appreciation of freedom? And I would say that, I get to have this interesting position looking at what groups in 100 different countries are doing, and I don't remember in my 2 decades plus in this organization a story that's quite as interesting as the one going on in Argentina over the past 2 years. And the think tank that Agustín Etchebarne founded some 12 or 13 years ago, has played and will play, I think, a really important role in how this story unfolds and whether it becomes a lasting success story that makes a difference for the people of Argentina who have suffered under some bad governance for their entire lives, and whether it's a success story that inspires others around the globe. So I know this will be an interesting conversation. Augustine earned degrees in Italy and then in his native Argentina. He began a career in finance, was a partner at Delphi Investments, but I've known him principally through his leadership of an organization he founded more than a decade ago called Fundación Libertad y Progresso. That's liberty and progress. And it's exciting that tonight we're going to have this conversation led by Dr. Sallie James, who I've also had the privilege of knowing for quite a few years. She got her PhD in agricultural economics and international trade policy at the University of Western Australia. And then she was at the Cato Institute initially as a trade policy analyst and then as director of development. And I know that she now is here in the Philadelphia area as a proud member of the Union League. I'm looking forward to learning alongside you as Sallie leads Augustine in conversation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brad, and thanks to Founding Forward for asking me to moderate this fascinating conversation. And I don't think it's overstating it to say that what's going on in Argentina could be a model for the world.
Hopefully.
In a good way, not as has historically been the case, which is a teachable moment, leading by example. Let me just go into a little bit more background, bit of brief history for the context, that Argentina was, at least for the first third of the 20th century, one of the fastest growing countries on earth. It had a sophisticated economy with much resource wealth, institutional sophistication, on par with Canada and Australia. I remember learning about Argentina during graduate school. And it was very much Buenos Aires and Melbourne were considered kind of sister cities, equal sophistication. And it even escaped the Great Depression relatively well compared to some other more developed countries. Even until the 1960s, it actually had a higher GDP per capita than Italy, Austria, Japan, even its colonial overlord Spain. Beginning in the 1930s, the Argentine economy deteriorated quite notably, mainly because of political instability following a coup. The country since then has become something of a byword for default. It has defaulted 9 times since independence and 3 times this century alone. Milei took office amid severe economic turmoil. Inflation was above 200% per annum, 40% poverty rate or higher, basically a bankrupt central bank, massive debt, a 15% fiscal and quasi-fiscal deficit. Augustine, perhaps it's instructive to our audience if you could explain a little bit, set the scene by briefly outlining the policy mistakes that got Argentina. What happened between its thriving first quarter of a century and the situation that Milei inherited in December 2023? What mistakes were made by the successive Argentinian governments?
Well, thank you, Sallie, and thank you also, Brad and John, to be here. It's an honor to me, and it's a privilege to be in this city that is so closely tied to the birth of liberty, around the world. And so to me, to be here, it's really a privilege. So thank you very much. And well, it's been like more than 80 years that we made this turn of the conversation in Argentina and on the politics and the cultural situation and also the government. But mainly in the 1930s, we started to be more, like nationalists. By 1940s, we got this president that was, probably you know about him, President Perón. Do you know him? Well, unfortunately, this guy was very important in Argentina in the wrong way. And his model was Mussolini in Italy. And so he tried to put this model of Mussolini's in Argentina. Argentina used to be like a free country before Perón. And with Perón, it changed completely. And he went to Italy, he learned the ways of Mussolini, he came back to Argentina, and he started to put this model, which is mainly is a very big state, a very interventionist state, a kind of corporatist state, and a chronic capitalism state. So it's mainly this kind of corporations. You have even the big firms, plus the unions, plus the politicians, and they took the grip of this country, and they made all these Keynesian ideas, of interventionism in the economy, and we ran like multiple deficits for many, many years, and then we defaulted at 9 times. So each year, remember it was been like more than 80 years. So it was the evolving of new laws, each law like getting into the families, each time with bigger and bigger state and a slower or lower liberties for everybody. And after 80 years, you got a huge disaster. Argentina was a huge disaster because inflation was 211%.
Oh, sorry, 200.
When Milei took office. And poverty was in 52%. And the first quarter, it went up to 57%. Now
That's all those out-of-work public servants, though, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Because he sacked, what was something like 37,000 civil servants? Something like that.
Actually, we have it went from 2 million people working for the state to 4 million people. We are 47 million people in Argentina.
My God.
So from 40, it's like I don't know, California, I would say. But imagine 4 million people working at the state in California. Well, that's Argentina, and it went from 2 million to 4 million by the last 20 years. And so in these last 20 years, of course, the country didn't improve at all. On the opposite side, we got the best education system of Latin America, for sure, and some Nobel Prize said that maybe it was one of the best education systems in the world, like 100 years ago. Now we have a terrible education system, but terrible, completely terrible education. So you can take a rich country, put the wrong ideas, and you get Argentina, because it was really a rich country. It was one of the 10 richest countries in the world. So it's been a difficult times for such a long time.
Right. And so I think, when I was reading a little bit about the history of Argentina in preparation for this talk, I read some of the statistics, and that as I understand it, and we'll get a little bit more into this, that the control over the economy by the Argentinian government wasn't necessarily through fiscal redistribution. It was through regulations, things like, price controls, rent controls. It was through having guilds, and as you say, this idea of clientelism, which is the government kind of negotiates with unions and, government workers and different groups, and then comes to some kind of arrangement and then imposes its will on the rest of the country. And so I wonder if you could tell us more about the sorts of policies that were in place and that had the biggest effects, you think, on the change that we are seeing. And I just want to go through some of the progress that has been made in the last 18 months, just to go through some of the statistics so that Dr. Etchebarne can tell us how we can recreate that. Spending, the budget was balanced within the first month of Milei's coming to office. Spending dropped by 30%. Inflation fell from a monthly figure of about 25% per month to, in May, 1.5%, the lowest in 5 years. Poverty dropped from, the figure I had here was 54% to below 37%. The country's risk premium fell from 2,100 points to 735 points. Real wages, employment and GDP growth rebounded. The second quarter of 2025, the quarter just gone, the growth rate was 7.6%, highest in nearly 2 decades. Trade has expanded with exports up 27%, imports up 10%. Both are good, as every free trader knows. Central bank reserves have increased. The peso now floats within a band rather than having various set exchange rates. And housing supply tripled and rent prices dropped following the removal of rent controls. So I'm just giving some of the statistics. Perhaps you can tell us some of these reform proposals, the program so far, not just the most important changes that he has made, but also how he built the political and institutional support to be able to get them through Congress. And I'm giving you now the opportunity to brag about the role you've played in that, because as I understand it, most of these ideas came from your think tank.
Well, thank you very much, Sallie, but I think there were many professors that we were teaching about Austrian economics and Chicago economics, no? Because you have the School of Chicago and the Austrian School of Economics, and President Milei is a professor on the Austrian School of Economics. He was trained as a Keynesian, like many of Argentine economists, myself also. We all played with, the Keynesian book, Samuelson, everybody with this...
Oh, Keynesian?
Keynesian economics, with Samuelson and all these type of professors. But at some point, our president, Milei, more or less around 2010, not so far away, not long away, he discovered Austrian principles of economics. And he established it's a moral change. He understood that Keynes was a completely moral person. And he got to understand, and he discovered what was the roots of the problem. And the roots of the problem is, how do you make the people of Argentina, that we were living in liberty, to get rid of our liberties? No, why? Well, he discovered that the problem is, and Hayek discovered this, von Hayek, and he said it's social justice. Because it's nothing more beautiful than social justice. Imagine, social is beautiful, justice is beautiful. You put these two words together, it should be beautiful, social justice. But
personally, when I hear the term social justice, I reach for my revolver, but please keep going.
Exactly.
Right.
And so he understood that you need to discover the problem, the roots of the problem, to change the outcomes.
Right.
And so he discovered he learned reading about the Austrian School of Economics, reading von Hayek, and reading von Mises, and reading Rothbard. And now there are many young kids in Argentina reading Mises, Hayek, Rothbard, and Milei. No? And so it's very interesting what the cultural change that is, because the root is an ethical problem. No, it's a moral problem. And so he went on TV explaining things, not going just to make a compromise on anything. He would be a guy with a lot of, I would say, a big character, I would say. No, like he has a strong character. And he could manage to speak out against 7 or 10 people at the same time, and shouting and maybe insulting and everything. But because we were in a place that you were asking me about what was the biggest problems. We have 150 different taxes. This is a way that you can manage to put the people out of a rich country into a poor country, 150 different taxes. You move and you get taxed. If you spend, you get a tax. If you make savings, you have another taxes. If you don't do nothing, well, I tax you anyway. So that's the way, 150 different taxes. Once we made a tax calculator, because was one very interesting guy, but he was very, I would say probably very wise, not wise, but very intelligent. That he was the Minister of Economy of Louis XIV in France, Colbert. And Colbert said the art of putting taxes is like the art of taking the feathers from the gun. So how do you say?
Oh, goose.
Of the
right.
goose, no? So you have to take the feathers from different parts of the body, so you can take most of the feathers out with very little annoyance to the person. So with 150 different taxes, they can take you out 70% of your income. Not 35% or 50%, but 70% of your income, because they are charging you in many different ways. And so you destroy the economy. You destroy the everything. You destroy companies. You destroy, and now, of course, you have to try to do something to avoid taxes. And so we have almost 50% of the people working in the underground economy. So after 80 years of this type of taxes and regulations, of course. No? So it's taxes and regulations, both things. And President Milei talked about these things with anger, no? Against politicians. Because the educational system in Argentina, we have it used to be a splendid education, but now it's an indoctrination. And this type of indoctrination, they explain that the kids that they have to be, to get anger because of the oppression of the system. Of course, they are talking about...
We don't have that here in America at all.
No? And all around Latin America is like this. And it was because of a Marxist, Brazilian Marxist, is Paulo Freire, an extraordinary pedagogue, but Marxist. And so he teaches the kids to get anger because of the oppression of the system. What did Milei say? You're right, you have to be angry, but not because of capitalism. Capitalism is wonderful. In the last 200 years, poverty in the world went from 90% to 9%. So capitalism is working. Where is not working? Well, who has all the poor countries? The ones that are not capitalist. So capitalism works. So the problem is not capitalist. The problem is what President Reagan said. Politicians are the problem. Politicians are the problem. The state is the problem. The state is not the solution. The state is the problem. The government is the problem. And the young kids, they understood. They understood. They said, I don't want to be like my older brother, that he's getting a check from the government, but he's not going out of poverty in his life. I want to do something different. I want to work. I want to do something new. I want to be an entrepreneur. So young kids are supporting the president. And older guys are not. So the struggling is with older guys. Young kids, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 19-year-olds, they are supporting the president. And I think we are going to have elections this year.
Yes, in October, right? Okay.
In October.
Okay.
And I'm sure now in Argentina, we are allowed 16-year-olds to vote. And that was because 20 years ago, young kids were socialists. But now it's in our favor, because now young kids are libertarians. You know? They are like Ron Paul, you know. The young kids are like Ron Paul. Ron Paul is a success in Argentina. There are many kids that knows Ron Paul because they know libertarian. They don't want the middle ground. They just want to go the whole way. We want liberties. And we are experiencing the rebirth of liberty in Argentina with lots of opposition.
I'll get to the opposition in a minute. Do you think that, so a strong character who's on television a lot, we have one of those too. How much of Milei's success do you think is due to his own philosophical underpinnings? I mean, you can be a loud person, big on television, and not pursue the right policies, but it sounds like the fact he was an economist, trained classically, well-trained economist, has something to do with the fact it's not just his personality and his ability to speak to people directly, but he's bringing it in the right direction. Would you say, is he popular? What's his popularity at the moment, do you know?
Oh, he's very much popular, but with young kids.
Yes,
not with,
right.
He's the last poll, it's about 50%.
Right.
So, and after doing a very tough job, because the very first month, he decreased more than 25% government expenditures. That tough. So you have to get a strong conviction, and he has, because he's a learned economist, and he knows. I think he wrote almost 20 books about economics. I know President Milei from the last 15 years or more, and he lives through, he's thinking, you ask him about sex and he will respond with equations in economics. So, this is President Milei.
Oh, is that unusual?
No, he really thinks about it. You go to his software and he has lots of equations writing in the window, whatever. So he's thinking about in economics terms, in mathematical terms. Although it's strange because Austrian economists, we don't like very much about the mathematical.
No, they're not usually maths. Yeah.
But he used to be a training like a neoclassical economist. Right. But now I think it's a very important thing. Let's understand what he's doing.
I want to come back to that because before we explore the substance of what needs to be done, what needs to come next, as I understand it, most of the reforms that have happened until now occurred under something called a super decree or a mega decree. Basically, it was authority that the Argentinian Congress had granted Milei for 1 year to kind of give him the opportunity and the authority to push through a lot of these reforms. I understand that authority did it expire last month? Is that correct?
Last week.
Last week. So what has happened now? Will he regain it? Is he going to ask for it again, for an extension? Or?
I think we have to wait for the elections. Because the elections are going to be in October, as we said.
Right.
And after the elections, probably he will... because when he took office, he got we have elections each time that we have presidential elections, we only select half of the Congress, not the other half. So as he was really for a very short time in politics, it was the first time he got into politics. So he got only a few votes for the Congress. And we got only 38 deputies out of 257. So it was very little. That's why he asked for this type of of this huge bill. He made a beautiful big bill.
Of slightly different from the one that we got.
Slightly different.
Correct. Right.
Because he really wants to make things done, and he wants to decrease, and he decreased already a lot the federal expenditures. We still need to get lower expenditures at the provincial level and the municipalities level, but he did a huge effort. And I think after the elections, he's going to get, in our calculations, probably more like, instead of 38, 100 deputies.
Out of,
out of 257.
257,
but
okay.
With the allies,
yes,
he will get half of the Congress. We have 2 chambers, but if you can manage 1 chamber, then it's more easier to have new laws. So he will start to try to get the huge reforms that we still need. We still need huge reforms in Argentina. We are in the middle of the road. We're in the middle of the river, I would say. No, it's not even a road. No, it's like you are traveling across a river.
So let's talk about what those important reforms are. Since you're too modest to do it, I will brag on your behalf.
Thank you.
You mentioned in a previous conversation we'd had that your think tank basically presented more than 100 proposals to this administration with reform ideas. And this is just the very model of an effective think tank. This is what think tanks are for, and the great work that Analyst does in supporting them, which is having ideas on the table ready to go when the opportunity strikes. So I congratulate you for having them and being ready to go with those. So you presented more than 100 proposals to him, or to the administration. Around a third, I think, have been implemented. He has adopted
Well, this week
them.
Another 12.
Okay, sorry, we're close to
almost 40%,
close to half. Okay, you said, and at the time we spoke last about this, a third were under discussion. So it's now about 42% of what you proposed. So what are the most important next steps that he...
Well, the most important was the decrease of the state, the reform of the state. We got like 23 ministries. Now we have 9. So we get rid of a lot of ministries, secretaries, subsecretaries, and directions, and then there were like 152 different decentralized organizations that we decreased up to 52. So that was huge. But now we still need a few things that are very important. The most important thing is the labor reform, because we have strong unions in Argentina. almost like Hoffa. Remember Hoffa? Well, we have our Hoffa in Argentina, that is the transport union, that is a terrible guy. It's called Moyano, and he's also a map guy. No, so this is huge, and we want to make our proposal is that we have to get free people. So if you want to pay the check for the union, that's okay. But if you don't, you don't have to be obliged to do it. And so this is one thing that in Brazil they did it, and the unions got a 97% decrease in profits, in income. So that's one very big step. And then, as we have, like I told you, almost 50% of the people working in the underground economy, all these labor laws are not applied to those guys. So you need to have more freedom, so like these guys are going to have, we want the people to work in the private sector, but formally. And it's a completely different thing, because if you have imagine you have a small supermarket in the underground economy, you cannot expand, because you cannot go to the stock market, you cannot go to the banks to ask money to an expansion. So the underground economy is terrible. And so you get to get, of course, you are not paying taxes. At least you are not paying so many taxes. But we have to decrease taxes. The other reform is to decrease taxes. We already decreased, the president already decreased a few taxes, but we still have a lot of ground they want to make a huge reform. In our reform, we are planned to have only 7 taxes instead of 150. I'm not sure if we are going to get there, but these are the things that we are trying to do. No, we want to completely change Argentina. The idea of the president is that he wants Argentina to be the most free country in the world. Not the second one, but the first one. Of course, maybe it's not going to happen in 4 years, but maybe if we have a second term, in 8 years. And that's the aim of the president. It's not going to be easy. As I told you, you have a lot of opposition.
Right. Well, I mean, I would certainly say that, judging on the pace that he's going so far, if he's almost at, is it 42% of your reforms after 18 months? I'd say he's making good progress.
Well, the Heritage Foundation Freedom Index, I think we are going up, like, from being on the bottom of the list almost. We were near Venezuela, Haiti. No, that was, Argentina was near there.
I think
Cuba, Venezuela, Haiti, Colombia, not Colombia, Colombia was better than Argentina, but Bolivia and Argentina, we were there.
I know on the measure of, I think, on regulations in the Human Freedom Index, I believe Argentina was 146 out of 164 countries.
Yeah.
And this is a very resource-rich, was a very, very well-integrated economy. And
we already climbed, I believe, almost 60 positions on economic freedom.
Right.
But we are going to see it in the next 2 years because of the delay when you are measuring. We are trying to measure in the same way as the Heritage Foundation does, but of course they are getting the data with delay.
Mm-hmm. So let's just talk a little bit about the risks. I want to read you a quote that I read from an Argentinian economist. He has basically implied that reliance on the market itself is risky. Let me read you this quote. Countries that make lasting progress have development planning. In Argentina, Milei is leaving everything to the market, which makes sustainable success almost impossible. I won't tell you the economist's name, although you could probably guess, but what would you say to that?
Well, we think that's exactly the opposite thing.
Yes.
Because we had got planned economy for 80 years, and it didn't work.
Right.
And it didn't work in Russia, it didn't work in the USSR, or even in China. No, imagine China. For many years, China was coming as a completely planned economy until 1979, when Mao died, and Deng Xiaoping was the new president. And he invited Milton Friedman and other guys, and they changed the economy into having a free market economy. And that was the success of China. China is not anymore what it used to be. No, I'm talking about the China of Deng Xiaoping, when he had these 13 regions that were open to the free market, and they expanded in an immensely nice way, and they took 600 million people out of poverty. Already in Argentina, we went from 57% of poverty in the first quarter that Milei took office to 35% this last month in our calculations. So already in 18 months. So I think the markets works. And I have to tell you again that we are in the middle of the road. We are not there yet. So when Argentina used to be a free market economy, it was impressive. You know that we are in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is in the roots of the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution of Argentina was inspired by our founding father, was Juan Bautista Alberdi, an impressive thinker, like Thomas Jefferson or Hamilton. He was huge. Thomas Jefferson, more than Hamilton. And he, by 1848, the U.S. invaded California. And the very next year, in 1849, you issued the new Constitution of California. That was the inspiration of our Constitution of 1853, 4 years later. And it was very similar. The following 70 years, both California and Argentina were the two regions in the world that were growing faster. And that's what an impressive. We went out of the desert into a rich country. We built 47,000 kilometers of railroads, of the best railroads of the world. It was 1/10 of all the railroads all around the world in Argentina, with only 0.5% of the population. So imagine what we did. And that was with free markets and with the investment of the British and the people from abroad that were investing in Argentina. We want to do something similar again. And we have the how to do it, no?
I was going to say that no pressure, but the entire world, I think, is looking at Argentina right now. And not just on those of us who are hoping to see this experiment lead to a freer, more prosperous, flourishing Argentina. I think there are probably a few academic economists and others looking at it, almost hoping that it fails, because they don't want to be proved. They don't want an example of a free market, truly transformed economy.
And they will have to
rewrite their books. That's right. Although they might like that. They usually do a new edition every year to sell more books. But
well, I remember Samuelson. Remember?
Yes, Samuelson had
most of the economists in the world.
I learned from his textbook.
Yeah, my textbook was like, I think it was the 20th or something like this editions. The first editions, he said that Russia was going to be better than the US.
He's edited it since then.
No?
So let me this is my last question, and I want to, and that kind of brings me to my point, which is, to what extent can Argentina be a model for the rest of the world to follow? And I want to read you a quote from an article in the National Review today from the editorial board there sent to me by John Miko, and the quote is, "If Argentina can become a byword for free markets, responsible fiscal policy, and supercharged economic growth, anything is possible, even a rejuvenation of those principles in the United States." What would your message be to those of us in the United States who are hoping to?
No, Sallie, I think that that's very interesting, because I think Argentina is very interesting to learn about it, because not only because what we did since 1853 to 1930, but what happened there. Because it's not all my teachers said that it was because everything was failing, but it's not true. Everything was doing well. And once a Jewish friend of mine, he said to me, that they have a saying I'm not sure if I'm going to say it very well in English, but he said, like, you have to understand how the families or the civilizations works, the rise and fall of civilizations. And like the first generation are the tough guys. These tough guys are the soldiers. They secure a territory. The second generation, they are also tough guys. They are the engineers, the constructions. They construct, they build the cities, they build the fortress, they build the bridges, the roads. The third generation, they are more like artists. They are the architects. They beautify the cities. Now, the fourth generation is the peak of the civilization, the poets, the writers, the painters. No? But the fifth generations, they are the ones that they get rid of all the other successful things, because they are the ones that they think that they have all they have all the rights and no duties, and they destroy everything. That is exactly what happened in Argentina. My feeling, this is happening in Europe. Would not talk about the US, but I think that happened in Argentina. It happened everywhere because it's the way that the human nature is. Mm-hmm. And now I think that after 80 years of decay, we are in the stage that we can rebuild Argentina, rebuild the liberties. And this is something very strange because we have the guy, the president, that he understands perfectly well how to do it. And so that's why Argentina is in a very interesting point.
I think that's a really good point for us to learn, and this is part of the work that Founding Forward does so well, which is reminding young people that what we enjoy today did not fall from the sky. It was. Exactly. It comes from what are the conditions for growth and freedom and prosperity.
And the soldiers and the constructors,
right,
and the hard work of many people.
What civic architecture do you need to create those conditions and create a free society? And that if we forget those lessons, we become like this fifth generation that you're talking about. John, are we ready to open it up to Q&A?
We are. Please
excellent.
join me in thanking Agustín and Sallie.
Thank
you. So questions, just put your hand up. We have a Kira with a microphone right here. Thank you.
Hello, Doctor. Thank you for coming. I'm David Nestor. You mentioned that you're gaining traction with younger voters, which is positive. You also mentioned that it's been harder going with older voters. And I understand how austerity measures can be difficult to stomach when the voting public takes more of a short-term view than a long-term view. Can you speak a little bit to the efforts that the administration is taking to win over older voters?
Well, it's interesting because President Milei, he just says what you think. He's not like he's not an unusual politician. He says things in a way that many people dislike, no? Because he has not very good manners, I would say, not at all. No, so I understand perfectly well that if he is shouting, he's shouting against journalists, for instance, because they are not, for instance, they don't mention any of the success that he's doing and all the, so, and you know that, for instance, the first thing that he did, he cut the money that went to the newspapers and the TV talk shows, so to the, I don't know how do you call this type of money, but that go to the media. No, to get it to zero. From more than $1 billion to zero, the very first day. So, of course, they don't like him. No? And there are many people that they don't like him. There are many people that are frightened because when you are opening your borders after having so many years of very high tariffs, then it's going to be very tough. Remember, for instance, like in the 1930s, there was a Keynesian in Argentina. Keynesian in Argentina. It was called Raúl Prebisch. And he explained, wrongly, but he explained that the rich countries, the central countries, would, through commerce, through trade, they would get grips of the peripheral countries around the world. And so at the beginning, we started to put tariffs against rich countries, against the US, against Europe. But then they say, well, but you cannot trade also with countries that have very low salaries. So you cannot trade with China or Indonesia. So at some point, we only got the ways to trade with Latin America. But at a certain point, Latin America started to trade with the US, like Mexico, with the NAFTA, no? or like Chile, with 90% of the world. So we only managed to trade within Mercosur. Now what we are decreasing the
Mercosur
barriers.
is a trade bloc in Latin America, that free trade area. Sorry.
Well, I wouldn't call it
I mean,
free trade.
no, I wouldn't either. But that's the idea.
I would say we have the biggest barriers against
Right.
others between Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay.
Right.
No, so we close the borders there, but we cannot trade. Now we are decreasing the barriers, and so, of course, there are many businessmen that are worried, and the unions are worried. All guys are worried, no, and that's it. And he's not doing anything to change that. He's talking to young people.
I'm going to jump in with a question because we have two economists who keep referring to two other economists.
Oh.
And I'm going to ask you, Sallie, tell us who Keynes was. And then I'm going to ask you, Agustín, to tell us who Hayek was. Just real quick. Give us, because
Sure.
you guys are bebopping around on those two.
Okay, so yes.
Tell us who they were.
Yeah, John Maynard Keynes was a British economist who was very popular in kind of the 20s and 30s. And he basically kind of popularized the idea that the government, through controlling taxes and spending, can step in and kind of alleviate some of the fluctuations in the business cycle. What I mean is, when there's a depression, Keynes basically said government should increase spending to spur the economy and lower taxes. And then when time's good again, the government, in theory, can step back, lower its spending again, and increase taxes. Of course, there's a ratchet effect, which means very rarely do they drop that spending again. But basically, Keynes came up with the idea government should interfere in the economy through the use of fiscal policy in order to smooth the business cycle and make depressions less severe.
And Hayek.
Excellent.
You do Hayek.
I gave our guest
Yeah.
the Hayek.
Yeah, good. Because
Well,
I didn't really study much Austrian economics.
Von
so-
Hayek was friend of Keynes,
Right.
but he was older. He went to London, but he was coming from Austria. And so he, like Lord Keynes, he was introducing him to the society in London and there, but he was the real economist, because Keynes was not an economist. He didn't know about economics. He only went to a few courses with Marshall, and so in his private letters, Hayek to Keynes, he tried to explain economics, and he was asking him, "What do you mean about interest rate? Because I think what you are saying there is completely different. What are interest rates to you?" Because he understood what all the tradition on monetary economies in Austria, but also in England, and he tried to explain to Keynes. And each time Keynes said, "Well, I don't think about this anymore." So he changes the subject, and he was reaching out. He was he was understanding, because Keynes was very, very bright. He was a very intelligent guy. But Hayek was an academic. He understood economics. He understood that planned economy cannot work. He understood that you need to have a freedom because you have a spontaneous order that is coming out of the. He understood the principles of the entrepreneur. How do you need that this entrepreneur cannot be managed by somebody else? That there is the beautiful things about innovation. He understood the roots of capitalism. The roots of capitalism is the entrepreneur. Is the way that you can invent new things that no politician is going to think about. There is no possibility that a minister of economy can understand what's going on. He understood that this is something very beautiful about how the society works. This spontaneous order that makes, through freedom, like Adam Smith said, explaining that the division of labor, how that you can work and you can produce an immense amount of abundance. And he understood how really the economy works. Unfortunately, Keynes died younger.
For those of you who are interested, if this has not satisfied your curiosity enough, there is a very amusing and pretty accurate rap video of Keynes versus Hayek rapping, and it's very, very good. And through the medium of rap, it conveys the philosophical and economic differences between the two. So
It's the only rap I've memorized.
Sorry, I do not, in fact, have it memorized. Okay. I should. My son's he's 10 years old and he's very good at memorizing raps. I should give him that rather than the other stuff that he listens to.
I have a question right here.
Yes.
Hi. I was just in Argentina in March, and it was really amazing to see the young people, like you're talking about, because they were so into the reforms. I actually have two very different questions. One was the trade seemed really unique to me, and I didn't know where it was going. So when you go around Argentina, you obviously don't see a lot of imports, but also when I talked to some of the people like Mendoza area, they said they went to Chile and they would go to Zara and they would pay about 50%, if not less, for the clothes there, and what they would describe what they would pay for just the clothing that they wore. What was interesting, it was the young people, and it didn't bother them, but it didn't make sense to me. So I was trying to understand that. And then the other question is, all these people, these government workers that got laid off, like what happened to them? Because we're dealing with that now, and I'm just trying to understand what happened to all those workers, and what would we see here?
Those are two very difficult questions. but
You were there as well. Yes. Yeah.
yeah, no, very interesting. It's true. The thing is that we are in the middle of the road, no, like in the middle of the road, I was saying, because we are decreasing tariffs, but they are still high. Mm-hmm. And for the companies, they say that they cannot compete. But for common people, they say we still have very expensive goods. Because now we have what President Milei did is he cut the deficit to zero. So he stopped printing of money, because the printing of money is making inflation. If you want to cut inflation, you have to cut down the printing of money. Like the video, I don't know if you have seen the video of Milton Friedman. He went to the printing machine and he stopped the machine. And he said, he stopped the printing of money, you are stopping inflation. But when you stop inflation, but you still have very high taxes and very high tariffs, then the goods are very expensive for people. So that's what you are seeing, that you are still there, that we still need to have, we have not a lot of imports. It's beginning to, actually it's increasing very fast. It's increasing very fast, but from very low point. That's why when you go to a supermarket in Barcelona or in Madrid or here, instead of Argentina, you would see in Argentina, there is not so diversity of goods. So it's totally right. The second question is very difficult. We have our proposal was that how do you make these people to go to work from the state to the private sector? And so we have some ways of doing this, like subsidizing the transition. So we are trying to subsidize the transition into the private sector. But we are just beginning. For instance, the federal government had 500,000 employees, and they decreased 51,000 employees in the first 18 months. So it went down like 11%, 12%. But then you have the provinces, and then you have the municipalities. They have most of the workers. But we have for instance, we share the same mountains as Chile. We have the same Cordillera de los Andes, huge mountains from the south to the north of the country, no? Very, very long mountains. Chile, every year, they made exports of about $55 billion in minerals. Argentina, only 4,000. Now it's changing. We have a special law for the expansion of this part of the economy with lower taxes. Instead of paying 35% of taxes, they are paying 22% for big investments, and we are giving them like a more secure economy for them, so that this part of the economy will grow faster than the rest of the economy. And we are going to build really new cities, whole new cities. When you have big mountains and big minings coming in, you will build a lot of new cities. And these new cities, it means that you have to build everything. And so we will need a lot of workers. The problem in Argentina is at the same time, we will need workers with a high level of capacity And then we will have a lot of people that have been working for the state for too long. So the transition is going to be difficult.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Agustín Etchebarne, Sallie James.
Sallie. Thank you.
We wish you and Argentina great success, and hopefully everyone can learn from that success. Again, thank you very much. We'll see everyone, I hope, on July 30th for our program with our Medal of Honor recipient at our Valley Forge campus. Thank you again. Have a wonderful